The river was black and silent, swollen from days of rain, moving slow enough to look harmless but strong enough to drag a man under without a sound. Moonlight fractured on its surface like broken glass. The seals lay half submerged along the muddy bank, rifles wrapped, breath controlled, hearts pounding in disciplined rhythm. The ambush had gone wrong 5 minutes ago, but it felt like hours. The enemy had anticipated their route. Shots had come from the trees, from the rocks, from angles no one should have known. 2 men were down. One was bleeding out despite the pressure. The radio crackled with whispers that carried fear no one wanted to admit. "We're done," someone murmured, barely louder than the water. It wasn't panic. It was resignation. They had no air support. Extraction was delayed. The enemy was closing in, methodical, patient. Whoever was hunting them knew how seals thought. That was the most terrifying part. What none of them noticed was the disturbance upstream. Not a splash, not a ripple that looked out of place. Just a shadow moving against the current, impossibly slow, impossibly deliberate. She had been in the river for 6 hours. Her name was Captain Mara Vance, callsign Raven, and she was the reason this mission had not already failed weeks ago. She had warned Command about the ambush probability. She had insisted on an overwatch position that Command rejected due to terrain risk. So she adapted. She always did. Her ghillie suit was soaked, weighted, threaded with river weeds and silt. Her breathing tube broke the surface only when the current bent reeds just enough to hide it. Her rifle, sealed and oiled, was cradled against her chest like a living thing. She had memorized the riverbed in satellite images, every rock, every drop-off. When the ambush began, she didn't rush. She waited. The river taught patience, and patience kept you alive. From her submerged vantage, she saw what the enemy thought was invisible. The slight sway of branches that didn't match the wind. The unnatural stillness of men pretending to be trees. The disciplined spacing. This wasn't a militia. This was a kill team trained by someone who understood special operations. Her jaw tightened. Up on the bank, the seals pulled their wounded closer. Ammo was low. Blood darkened the mud. One man whispered a prayer. Another checked his sidearm, knowing it wouldn't matter if the next push came all at once. That was when the first shot rang out. It didn't come from the trees. It came from the river. The round cracked through the night and dropped an enemy point man mid-step. Before the body hit the ground, a second shot followed, then a third, each spaced with lethal calm. Heads snapped toward the water in confusion. No one had been watching the river. No one ever watched the river. Mara rose just enough to fire, water sliding off her rifle, her eye already tracking the next target. She didn't rush. She didn't waste rounds. She selected leaders. Men giving hand signals, men with radios, men whose posture screamed command. One by one, they fell. Panic rippled through the enemy line. The seals stared in disbelief as fire erupted from a direction that should have been impossible. The pressure lifted, just slightly, just enough to breathe. "Raven," someone whispered into the comms, disbelief shaking the word apart. She didn't answer. She was already moving. She slid from the river like a ghost, low, silent, mud swallowing her boots. Her secondary weapon came up as she advanced through cover the enemy had abandoned in confusion. A flash of movement, a suppressed burst, another threat erased. The enemy tried to regroup, but they were no longer hunting. They were being hunted. Mara moved with terrifying precision, her presence felt more than seen. She used the darkness the way others used armor. When she reappeared on a rock outcropping above the seals, silhouetted for half a second by moonlight, time seemed to pause. She fired again. The last coordinated push collapsed. What followed was silence, broken only by the river and the ragged breathing of men who had just realized they were still alive. Mara finally keyed her mic. "Ambush neutralized," she said calmly. "Perimeter secure for now." No one spoke for a moment. Then someone laughed. It was shaky and half hysterical, but it was laughter. "You came from the damn river," one of them said. She slid down beside them, already scanning, already working. "Enemy never looks where survival seems impossible," she replied. "That's why I live there." She knelt by the wounded without ceremony, hands steady, eyes sharp. She applied pressure, adjusted tourniquets, checked pulses. This wasn't heroics. This was duty. Extraction finally arrived 40 minutes later. The rotors tore the night apart. As they lifted off, one of the seals looked back at the river, still dark, still quiet, as if it had never given up its secret. Back at base, the debrief was tense and heavy. Command asked questions that danced around blame. Mara answered only what mattered. She didn't gloat. She didn't argue. She simply laid out the facts with surgical clarity. Later, alone, she cleaned her rifle. The river mud fell away. The steel shone again. She thought about the whisper she'd heard over the comms. "We're done." She understood it. Every operator did. There was always a moment when odds crushed hope into something small and fragile. The difference between life and death was what you did in that moment. For her, the answer had always been the same. Rise. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, if you felt the tension, the courage, and the unseen strength behind the mission, then don't forget to support the channel. Subscribe to Her World Stories for more powerful, emotional, and unforgettable stories of strength, sacrifice, and survival. Your support helps bring these stories to life. Because sometimes the battle isn't won by the loudest voice or the biggest weapon.